The bulldozers roared like angry beasts, their metal teeth tearing into the earth as if it had wronged them. Dust clouds swirled in the air, choking the sunlight and painting the sky a dull gray. Men in hard hats shouted over the noise, their voices sharp and urgent, as they directed the machines to dig deeper faster. And there, in the middle of it all, stood a row of half-built houses, their wooden skeletons rising like ghosts from the ground. But this wasn't just any construction site. This was my land. I stood at the edge of the chaos, my hands clenched into fists, my heart pounding like a drum. The Homeowners Association, HOA, had done it. They had built 96 homes on my property right under my nose. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that they had walked straight into my trap. A man in a crisp suit approached me, his face smug, his steps confident. He was the HOA president, Mr. Grayson, and he had the nerve to smile as if he'd won some great victory. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice dripping with fake politeness, "I see you've decided to join us. Pity you couldn't be here sooner. We've made quite a bit of progress, haven't we?" I didn't answer. I just stared at him, my eyes cold, my lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't know. None of them knew. They thought they had outsmarted me, that they had taken what was mine without a fight. But they were wrong. So very wrong. Mr. Grayson's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Well, since you're here, I suppose it's only fair to inform you that this land no longer belongs to you. We've followed all the legal procedures, and everything is in order. You have no claim here." I finally spoke, my voice low and steady. "Is that so?" He nodded, his confidence returning. "Yes, it is. And there's nothing you can do about it." I smiled then, a slow, dangerous smile that made his eyes narrow in suspicion. "We'll see about that." Before he could respond, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, confused and uneasy. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what was coming, and I couldn't wait to see the look on his face when he realized the truth. But let's rewind a bit. Let's go back to the beginning, to the moment this all started, when the HOA first set their sights on my land. Because this wasn't just about property. This was about greed, betrayal, and a plan so clever, so perfectly executed, that even I was impressed with myself. It all began 6 months ago, on a quiet Sunday morning. I was sitting on my porch, sipping coffee and watching the sun rise over the rolling hills of my land. It was peaceful, serene, and exactly the way I liked it. But that peace was about to be shattered. A black SUV pulled up to my gate, and out stepped Mr. Grayson and 2 other men in suits. They looked out of place, their polished shoes crunching on the gravel as they approached my porch. "Mr. Carter," Mr. Grayson said, extending his hand. "We're from the HOA. We'd like to talk to you about your land." I shook his hand, but I didn't invite them to sit. "What about it?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're interested in purchasing it. We believe it would be the perfect location for a new housing development." I raised an eyebrow. "And why would I want to sell?" "Because we're offering you a very generous price," he said, pulling a document from his briefcase. "Take a look." I glanced at the paper, but I didn't need to read it to know it was a lowball offer. They thought they could buy me off, that I would just hand over my land without a fight. But they didn't know me. They didn't know what I was capable of. "No," I said, handing the document back to him. "My land isn't for sale." His smile faded, replaced by a look of annoyance. "Mr. Carter, I think you're making a mistake. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." I said no, I repeated, my voice firm. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do." They left, but I knew this wasn't over. I could see it in their eyes, in the way they exchanged glances as they walked back to their SUV. They wanted my land, and they weren't going to take no for an answer. And that's when I decided to set my trap. Over the next few weeks, I watched as they tried every trick in the book to force me to sell. They sent letters, made phone calls, even tried to get the local government involved. But I didn't budge. I played the part of the stubborn landowner, refusing to give in, all the while quietly putting my plan into motion. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Harper, who specialized in property law. Together we dug through old records, uncovering a little-known clause in the land deed that the HOA had overlooked. It was a loophole, a tiny detail that most people would have missed. But not me. I saw it for what it was, a way to turn the tables. And now, as I walked away from the construction site, I couldn't help but smile. They thought they had won. They thought they had taken my land. But they were wrong. So very wrong. Because in just a few hours, everything was going to change. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the construction site as I drove away. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing with the details of my plan. Ms. Harper had assured me everything was in place, but there was no room for error. The HOA had played dirty, and now it was my turn to strike back. I pulled into the driveway of my small, secluded cabin, hidden deep in the woods just a few miles from the construction site. It was the only piece of land I had left after the HOA's aggressive takeover, and it was the perfect place to lay low while I prepared for the final move. Inside, the cabin was cluttered with maps, legal documents, and a whiteboard covered in notes and diagrams. This was my war room. Ms. Harper was already there, sitting at the table with her laptop open. She looked up as I entered, her sharp eyes narrowing behind her glasses. "Did they take the bait?" she asked, cutting straight to the point. "Hook, line, and sinker," I replied, tossing my keys onto the counter. "They're building like there's no tomorrow. They have no idea what's coming." She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Good. Paperwork is ready. All we need now is the right moment to drop the bomb." I sat down across from her, my mind still replaying the scene at the construction site. Mr. Grayson's smug face, the noise of the bulldozers, the half-built houses. It all fueled my determination. "When do we move?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she said firmly. "I've already scheduled a meeting with the county clerk. Once we file the documents, the HOA won't know what hit them." I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. Tomorrow. It all came down to tomorrow. But as confident as I was, a small part of me couldn't help but wonder if we'd missed something. The HOA had resources, connections, and a reputation for getting what they wanted. What if they had a trick up their sleeve that we hadn't anticipated? Ms. Harper seemed to read my thoughts. "Relax, Carter," she said, closing her laptop. "We've covered every angle. They're so busy patting themselves on the back that they haven't even noticed the trap closing around them." I nodded, but the tension in my chest didn't ease. "What about the buyers?" I asked. "The people who've already put down deposits on those houses. What happens to them?" Her expression softened just a little. "They'll get their money back. The HOA will be responsible for refunding every penny. And once the truth comes out, they'll be too busy dealing with lawsuits to cause any more trouble." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. It wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about justice. For me, for the people who'd been tricked into buying homes on stolen property, and for everyone else the HOA had bullied over the years. But justice came at a cost, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the price was about to get a lot higher. That night I barely slept. My mind was a whirlwind of plans, doubts, and what-ifs. What if the HOA found out about the loophole before we could act? What if they had someone on the inside, someone who could tip them off? What if? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car engine outside. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. It was past midnight, and no one should have been out here. I grabbed the flashlight I kept by the bed and crept to the window, peering through the curtains. A black SUV was parked just outside the gate. My stomach dropped. It was the same SUV Mr. Grayson had arrived in earlier. What were they doing here? Had they figured out my plan? I watched as two figures stepped out of the vehicle, their faces hidden in shadow. They moved quickly, slipping through the gate and heading straight for the cabin. My mind raced. I couldn't let them find the documents, the maps, the evidence of my plan. I had to act fast. I grabbed my phone and dialed Ms. Harper's number, keeping my voice low. "They're here," I whispered. "At the cabin." I don't know how they found me, but they're coming inside." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then her voice, calm but urgent. "Don't let them in. Don't let them see anything. I'm on my way." I hung up and grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear myself think. The footsteps were getting closer, crunching on the gravel path. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. If they wanted a fight, they were about to get one. The doorknob turned slowly, and the door creaked open. I raised the bat, ready to swing, but before I could move, a voice called out from the darkness. "Mr. Carter, are you in there? We need to talk." It wasn't Mr. Grayson. It was a woman's voice, soft but firm. I hesitated, the bat still raised. "Who are you?" I demanded. "My name is Claire," she said, stepping into the light. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, with sharp features and piercing green eyes. "I'm a reporter, and I think I know what you're planning." My grip on the bat tightened. "What do you want?" She held up her hands, showing she meant no harm. "I want to help you. The HO has been corrupt for years, and I've been trying to expose them. But I need your story. I need proof." I stared at her, my mind racing. A reporter. Here. This changed everything. If she was telling the truth, she could be an ally. But if she was working for the HOA, she could ruin everything. Before I could decide what to do, headlights flashed through the window. Ms. Harper's car pulled up behind the SUV, and she stepped out, her expression grim. "Carter," she called. "Don't do anything stupid." Claire turned to look at her, and for a moment, the three of us stood there in a tense silence. Then Claire spoke again, her voice steady. "I'm not your enemy. But if we don't work together, the HOA wins. And neither of us wants that." I lowered the bat, my mind still spinning. This wasn't part of the plan. But maybe, just maybe, it was the twist we needed. "All right," I said finally. "Let's talk." But as I stepped aside to let her in, I couldn't shake the feeling that the game had just gotten a lot more dangerous. The HO wasn't the only one with secrets, and if Claire was who she claimed to be, she might be the key to bringing them down, or the one who could destroy everything. The trap was set. But now it seemed there were more players in the game than I had anticipated. And not all of them were on my side. The cabin felt smaller with the three of us inside. Claire sat at the table, her hands folded neatly in front of her, while Ms. Harper paced the room, her sharp eyes darting between us. I stood by the door, still gripping the bat, though I knew I probably didn't need it anymore. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Start talking," Ms. Harper said finally, stopping in front of Claire. "Who are you, and why are you here?" Claire didn't flinch. "Like I said, I'm a reporter. I've been investigating the HOA for months. They've been using shady tactics to take over land, bully homeowners, and line their own pockets. But every time I get close to exposing them, they shut me down. They have connections everywhere. Lawyers, politicians, even the police. It's like they're untouchable." I exchanged a glance with Ms. Harper. This was exactly what we were up against. "So why come to me?" I asked. "What do you think I can do?" Claire leaned forward, her green eyes locking onto mine. "Because you're the first person who stood up to them. Everyone else either gives in or gets crushed. But you've got a plan, don't you? I can see it in your eyes. And if you let me in, I can help you make sure the whole world knows what they've done." Ms. Harper crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. "And what's in it for you? Pulitzer? Fame? Money?" Claire shook her head. "Justice. My parents lost their home because of the HOA. They fought back, but in the end they couldn't win. I've made it my mission to make sure no one else has to go through what they did." There was a raw honesty in her voice that made me believe her. But Ms. Harper wasn't so easily convinced. "Prove it," she said. "Show us what you've got." Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder, sliding it across the table. "This is everything I've gathered so far. Emails, bank records, witness statements. It's enough to start a fire, but not enough to burn them down. Not yet. That's where you come in." I opened the folder and flipped through the documents. It was